Her daughter told the bank she was just the co-signer, like she wasn't standing right there. Marion Thomas, 73, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Tessa smirked, already spending money that wasn't legally hers. By nightfall, the accounts were locked, the house retitled, and the passwords changed. Marion had once handed over her trust with open arms. Now she guarded it with ink and evidence, and when Tessa came calling with entitlement in her voice, the paper trail shut the door. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The line inside the bank stretched like taffy under fluorescent lights. Marion stood beside her daughter, purse tucked close beneath her arm, the faint smell of lemon cleaner hanging thick in the air. She wore her best wool coat, navy with the brass buttons Harold used to tease her about, and her shoes clicked softly against the polished tile as she stepped forward. Tessa stood tall and impatient in front of her, her hair pulled back in that tight ponytail she always wore when she was trying to look like someone in control. She waved at the bank teller like they were old friends. "We're here for a withdrawal," Tessa said brightly. $40,000. The teller blinked, young, nervous. "That's a large transaction. I'll need both account holders present and consenting." Tessa gave a well-rehearsed laugh and leaned in closer. "Oh, she's just the co-signer," she said, gesturing vaguely behind her. "I'm the one who handles the actual finances." Marion felt it then, that specific kind of sting that only lands when someone throws a match at the bridge you built for them. Her throat tightened, not with tears but restraint. She didn't say a word, not when people turned, not when the woman in the red peacoat beside the rope stanchion raised her eyebrows. Not even when the teller's eyes flicked from Tessa to Marion with a silent question hanging in the air. 6 years earlier, after Tessa's divorce unraveled like wet paper, Marion had opened her arms and her accounts. She had offered the upstairs room in the house, her guest bathroom, and later, when the job hunt dragged on and the bills began piling, she added Tessa to her checking account and the deed. "Only for convenience," Marion had said at the time. "Just so you don't get stuck with bank paperwork while I'm in a waiting room somewhere." Tessa had nodded, tears in her eyes, voice low and grateful. "Of course, Mom, just until I get back on my feet." That was 4 years, 2 vacations, and 1 leased Lexus ago. "Do you have the secondary holder with you today?" the teller asked, more hesitantly now. She was looking directly at Marion. Tessa exhaled loudly. "Yes, she's right here." She turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, just tell her it's okay. It's for that investment we talked about." They hadn't talked, not really. Tessa had mentioned something big and vaguely waved her phone screen last week, but no numbers, no paperwork, no consent. Still, Marion said nothing. Instead, she reached slowly into her purse. Her fingers brushed past her reading glasses, past a tin of peppermints, until they closed around a thick, cream-colored envelope. Inside, the original deed to the house. Not a photocopy, not a printout. The real thing, filed, notarized, and signed with Harold's full name before he passed. Marion had slipped it into her bag that morning, not by accident. She stepped forward, slow but sure, and laid the deed on the marble counter with care. The room seemed to inhale. "Not so fast," Marion said. Tessa blinked. The teller's eyes widened. Marion's voice didn't waver. "You'll want to read this first before approving anything. I'm not just a co-signer. I'm the original owner, and I never signed off on any withdrawal." The words didn't echo, but they didn't have to. The silence that followed was louder than any reaction. Behind the counter, the teller straightened and reached for a manager call button, and behind her, Marion watched her daughter's confidence flicker for the first time in years as the room tilted toward truth. The teller's fingers hovered above the keyboard, eyes flicking between the deed on the counter and the frozen expression on Tessa's face. Marion didn't blink. She didn't need to raise her voice. The proof was in ink, and it was staring them all in the face. "I'll have to escalate this to compliance," the teller finally said, her tone clipped now, professional. "We're placing a temporary freeze on the account until full authorization and documentation can be verified." Tessa's mouth opened, but Marion had already turned toward the lobby doors. She didn't look back. Not when Tessa hissed her name under her breath, not when the security guard glanced toward them like a scene might break out. Marion walked like the marble tiles were hers. By the time they pulled into the driveway, the silence between them was thick enough to blister. Tessa yanked the keys from the ignition like she wanted them to scream. "You just humiliated me in front of a teller," she snapped, slamming the car door so hard Marion flinched. "Do you have any idea how that looked?" Marion stepped onto the front porch, key slipping into the lock with practiced ease. "I know exactly how it looked." Inside, the scent of jasmine tea still lingered from the morning steep. It was the kind of ordinary comfort that now felt like a lie. Tessa tossed her purse onto the armchair and turned, eyes sharp. "You've always had this control complex, always watching, hovering. I finally try to do something smart with our money, and you sabotage it like I'm 12. "You tried to move $40,000 without telling me," Marion said, calm but unyielding, "and then told a stranger I didn't matter." Tessa scoffed. "It's our money, our house. You added me, remember, or was that just for show?" Marion walked past her down the hallway to her room, her voice trailing but firm. "I added you because I trusted you, not because I disappeared." Years ago, when Tessa was 16, she'd broken her wrist falling off the neighbor's rope swing. Marion had driven her to the hospital without panic, kept her calm, signed the paperwork, asked the questions. When the doctor looked surprised that Marion wasn't flustered, she'd simply said, "I raised her to know how to get back up." That had been Marion's parenting style, not coddling, not indulgent. A recipe of tough love and late-night listening sessions, seasoned with equal parts sarcasm and encouragement. So where had that daughter gone? 2 days later, Marion sat in a quiet office with high-backed chairs and thick velvet drapes that smelled faintly of cedar and old legal pads. Her estate attorney, Leah Morgan, looked over the deed, the account agreements, and the handwritten notes Marion had brought. "She's listed as co-owner, but the language here," Leah tapped the document, "it's soft. There are no survivorship rights, no sole control clauses. That helps you. You're still primary." "But," her brow furrowed, "there are red flags, such as," Leah leaned forward, "a pattern of dependence, undue influence, signs of entitlement. You've essentially enabled her to treat joint ownership like a solo act, and now it's bleeding." Marion stared at the table. "I thought I was helping." "You were, but help doesn't entitle someone to erase you." Marion exhaled slowly. "What are my options?" Leah opened a legal pad, pen poised. "There's a legal path to reverse this, to reclaim full control, rescind co-ownership, and unwind financial entanglements, but," she looked up levelly, "you'll need proof. Proof that she's manipulated access, lied, pressured, that she treated this house like a checkbook and you like a signature." Marion met her gaze. "Steady now." "I may not have it yet, but I know where to start looking." It started with the click. Marion was standing at the sink rinsing her teacup when the Bluetooth speaker on the kitchen counter chimed and connected. A half-second later, Tessa's voice poured through it, clear and unfiltered, sharp-edged like the clink of ice in an empty glass. "Yeah, no, she didn't even fight it at first, just stood there like an antique chair." Marion froze, the tea towel in her hand went limp. "She thinks she has control," Tessa continued, her voice bouncing off the tile, "but legally she signed the rights years ago. It's as good as mine." Marion didn't move. Her hands stayed still, fingers gripping ceramic. A faint buzzing started in her ears. She looked toward the doorway. Tessa was upstairs, pacing her room, likely unaware her phone had synced to the kitchen speaker again. It wasn't the first time it had happened, but it would be the last. "40 grand is nothing if I play it right. She's old software. She'd never survive a legal push." The words landed like pins, each one sharper than the last. Marion's jaw tightened. Her heartbeat was a distant drum, steadying her, reminding her what still pulsed beneath skin they thought was delicate. She set the mug down carefully, walked to the counter, and tapped her phone awake. Hit record. For 5 minutes and 39 seconds, she captured every word. Tessa's tone was casual, confident, almost giddy in its cruelty. She talked about investments, possible renovations. "Maybe I'll put in French doors finally." As though the house wasn't still holding Harold's framed navy photo and Marion's winter quilts, as though Marion wasn't still alive in it. "She barely checks her mail. She won't even know until the funds are long gone." The recording ended with a laugh, not one Marion recognized. She stared at the file for a beat, then hit send. The email to her attorney had no message, just the attachment. That was enough. By that evening, Marion had begun her own renovations, the digital kind. She logged into every account: gas, electric, water, Wi-Fi. One by one, she transferred each utility into a private, revocable trust she had named after her maiden name, Ellison Holdings, just formal enough to sound distant. She updated the passwords, each one longer than the last. woven with symbols, dates only she would remember. Harold's VA number, Lena's birth year, the street she grew up on before anyone else had claimed her future. She downloaded a password manager, encrypted every note, and deleted every auto login Tessa might have known about. The next morning, she walked into the bank alone. She met with the branch manager in a quiet office filled with plants and framed awards. She handed him a notarized letter prepared by her attorney, revoking all non-consensual actions by the cosigner pending legal review. He accepted it without question. "I'll update this immediately, Mrs. Thomas." "Miss," she corrected without blinking. Again that evening, Marian reheated leftover chicken and sat with the silence. It didn't feel empty this time. It felt like armor. Upstairs, Tessa was uncharacteristically quiet. Maybe she'd noticed the Bluetooth sync mishap, maybe not. Marian didn't care. The message had already been sent. 2 days later, a white envelope arrived, addressed to Marian in printed font, no handwriting. The logo in the top left corner stopped her heart for half a beat. First River Community Bank. She sliced it open with a butter knife, hands calm but ready. Inside. "We have received a notarized consent form dated last week authorizing the withdrawal of $40,000 from joint account ending in -8,719. As per the documentation received, this form includes both signatures and an accompanying notary stamp. We are contacting you to confirm authenticity before proceeding." Marian reread it. Her breath did not quicken, but her hand curled slowly into a fist, because she hadn't signed anything, and someone had. Marian stood in front of the frosted glass doors of First River Community Bank, with the letter still folded in her coat pocket. Her fingers curled around the cool weight of her passport and original deed papers. No photocopies this time. When the receptionist offered her a customer service rep, Marian calmly replied, "No, I need the compliance officer." The woman blinked, uncertain. "Is this regarding an account issue?" Marian's smile was thin but precise. "It's regarding a felony." They met her in a small room with a muted carpet and 2 chairs that wobbled slightly at the base. The compliance officer, a man in his early 40s with tired eyes and a wedding ring that looked recently cleaned, reviewed her documents in silence. She slid across the original deed, a sworn affidavit from her attorney, and a copy of her current signature for comparison. Finally, she placed the bank's letter between them like the final piece in a puzzle. "I did not sign this," Marian said. "And I never authorized any withdrawal. I believe the form you received was forged." He didn't deny it. Instead, he glanced at the printout again, squinting at the notary stamp. "We'll need to open a formal investigation," he said carefully, "starting today." By the time she left the bank, the autumn wind had picked up. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk like paper trails. Marian walked slowly, deliberately, letting the cold air bite her cheeks. The chill felt honest. That afternoon, she met with Leah again. The attorney's face darkened as Marian laid out the letter. "We're filing a motion immediately to nullify any forged documents," Leah said, reaching for her laptop. "We'll flag every financial institution you've ever had joint access with. Tessa's banking privileges are done." Marian didn't nod. She simply stared out the window where a crow perched on the lamppost, watching back. At the house, Marian moved room to room, checking locks. The spare keys Tessa used were already disabled, but Marian wasn't naive. Trust was broken. Vigilance had to replace it. She contacted a local security company. Within 24 hours, a motion-triggered camera system was installed. One at the front door, one facing the driveway, and one discreetly nestled in the hallway, aimed directly at her home office. She didn't tell Tessa. That silence was strategic. Later that evening, Marian did something she hadn't done in years. She opened the desktop computer Harold once used to catalog photos of their garden. It was dusty, slow, but the hard drive still worked. She pulled up last week's video logs. She'd installed a basic camera years ago above her desk, forgotten until now, and there it was, timestamp 10:42 a.m. Tuesday, 1 week before the bank attempt. Tessa alone in the office, rummaging. She pulled open the bottom drawer where Marian kept the notary seal from a friend who had retired years ago. It was stored as a keepsake, unused for ages. Marian watched as Tessa glanced over her shoulder, then slid something into her purse. The screen flickered slightly, but the image was clear enough. Her daughter, nose deep in papers she didn't own. Marian sat back, staring at the monitor for a long time before calling Leah again. "I need a handwriting expert," she said. "A certified one." The expert's name was Dr. Wesley Chen, and he reviewed the signature on the form against Marion's known writing samples. 3 days later, his verdict came in writing. The signature on the submitted bank form is not consistent with Miss Thomas's documented signature. Probable forgery. Confidence level, 96%. Marion printed the report and tucked it into a red folder labeled Final Lines. She barely had time to file it away before the doorbell rang. Tessa stood there in leggings and a windbreaker, sunglasses still perched on her head like she was about to jog through the truth. "I want my share," she snapped. "I'm not leaving without it." Marion didn't flinch. She turned toward the hallway and said evenly, "Let me show you something first." Marion closed the door behind her calmly, slowly, as if sealing off a draft rather than a storm. She didn't answer right away. She walked into the living room, the quiet punctuated only by the slow tick of the mantel clock Harold had wound every Sunday without fail. On the coffee table sat a small Bluetooth speaker and a red folder. "Sit down," Marion said. "Not a request." Tessa hesitated but followed, arms crossed. Marion tapped the speaker. It gave a soft chirp, then filled the room with Tessa's own voice, played back in crisp, damning clarity. "She's old software. She won't fight it. 40 grand is as good as mine." Tessa's face paled mid-sentence. Her hand shot up. "You're recording me now?" "Number. I already did." The speaker continued. "She barely checks her mail. She won't even know." Marion stopped the playback. The silence afterward landed like a sentence handed down from something older than law. From the folder, she pulled out 2 photos. One was a still frame of Tessa rifling through Marion's office drawers. The other was a printed report from Dr. Chen's handwriting analysis. Then finally, she slid a printed sheet across the table. It was a copy of California Penal Code Section 470, forgery. "Section 470, subsection D," Marion read aloud. "Signing another person's name with intent to defraud." She looked up. "That's what you did." Tessa's mouth opened, then shut, her carefully cultivated expression, measured indignation, strained charm fractured. "You want war?" she snapped, rising to her feet. Marion stood too, calm as ever. "Number. I want records, paper trails, legal standing, and I already have them." That afternoon, Marion sat beside Leah at the county clerk's office. The petition to revoke all co-signatory privileges was signed, time-stamped, and notarized before the hour turned. Leah's paralegal had already drafted the restraining order application. Within 72 hours, Tessa would be legally barred from accessing any shared financial space, pending the ongoing fraud investigation. "Think she'll back down now?" Leah asked as they left. "No," Marion said, zipping her coat. "But I'm not counting on her fear. I'm counting on the facts." 2 days later, Marion met her granddaughter Lena at the Oak Ridge branch of Northern Trust Bank. Lena, 26, sharp as flint and twice as loyal, walked Marion through the steps of moving her savings into a private living trust. They signed the papers together. "I don't know how you kept so quiet all this time," Lena said as they exited, a fresh set of account statements in hand. "I was raised to believe silence was safe," Marion replied. "But now I know silence is where they build their plans." Lena nodded slowly. "Well, you're building something better." Back at home, Marion packed her original documents, deed, medical power of attorney, trust formation, into a new safe deposit box. She updated her passwords again, this time storing the recovery phrases in a vault only Lena had access to. Her fingers hovered over a final envelope, the revocation of Tessa's financial proxy. She sealed it with a steady hand. The locks were changed, the cameras monitored, the paper trail was clear. Marion slept that night with the hall light off for the first time in weeks. But peace is rarely uninterrupted. The next morning, a certified letter arrived, legal stationery, court seal. Marion opened it with a butter knife and an unbothered sigh. Petition for civil hearing, evaluation of cognitive capacity, filed by Tessa G. Thomas. It landed on the table like ash. Lena picked it up, eyes narrowing. "She's trying to claim you're unfit." Marion reached for her tea. "She's trying to buy time." "But what now?" Marion took a long sip and set the cup down. "Now," she said. "I make her regret underestimating me again." The moment Marion set the court petition down, she didn't cry. She didn't pace. She reached for her calendar, flipped to the next clean week, and circled Thursday in red. Then she picked up the phone. "I need a cognitive assessment," she told the receptionist. "As soon as possible. I'd prefer full-scale neuropsychological." The woman on the line hesitated. "May I ask who referred you?" "My daughter," Marion said, voice smooth as glass. "She thinks I've lost my mind. I'd like to prove I haven't." "The office of doctor?" Fiona Park sat inside a slate-gray medical plaza, sandwiched between a dental clinic and a Pilates studio. The waiting room smelled of eucalyptus and anxiety. Marion sat upright in her chair, hair pinned back, reading the newspaper as if it were any other day. But inside, her nerves were a metronome, clicking, clicking. "Doctor." Park was young but not inexperienced, with eyes that looked like they measured more than IQ. "This isn't a trap," she said gently. "There's no right answer, only honest ones." "Good," Marion replied, "because I've got nothing left to prove except the truth." They began with short-term recall, then sequences, logic puzzles, language processing, shapes to replicate, word associations. Marion moved through each task with quiet intensity, the kind she used to braid Tessa's hair before piano recital. The final test was delayed recall. 5 words, 20 minutes. Dr. Park returned with a smile. "Do you remember the list?" "Sure," Marion said. "Lamp, piano, velvet, orange, and freedom." Dr. Park blinked. "You even got the order." 3 days later, the report arrived, bound, signed, and notarized. The first page was stamped with a single phrase in all caps: "Mentally competent, no impairment detected." At the bottom, Dr. Park's handwritten note: "No cognitive concerns. Miss Thomas presents as articulate, insightful, and wholly independent." Leah updated the trust immediately. Marion requested an irreversible competency clause, one that legally locked in her ability to amend her estate for as long as the affidavit stood. "No future hearings," she said. "No loopholes. She doesn't get to rewrite my lucidity." That evening, over lemon bars and strong coffee, Marion slid a fresh copy of her will across the dining table to Lena. "You're in," she said. Lena blinked. "I mean, I thought maybe one day, but—" "I've seen what happens when people think they're owed by blood alone," Marion said, slicing another bar. "You earned this. By standing beside me, not over me." Lena looked down at the paper, tears warming her voice. "Thank you." Marion simply nodded. "Now help me figure out how to encrypt this thing." Word spread fast through Marion's circle. Church friends, book club women, bridge partners at the rec center. After her fitness results and Tessa's legal stunt, they started sharing stories over cups of weak tea and folded napkins. "Mine forged my signature at a car lot," whispered Paula, 78. "They drained my CD account," confessed Jolene, 81, "and said it was for dental emergencies. I haven't had teeth in years." Marion didn't speak much during these gatherings. She just listened, collected, filed their pain away beside her own like bank statements with overdue balances. A week later, the phone rang just after 4 p.m. It was the Midtown Beacon, the local paper that never ran anything more serious than dog rescue fundraisers or bake sale recaps. "This is Annalie Rousseau," said the voice, professional but not cold. "I've heard your name a few times now from 3 different women, actually. Would you be open to an interview about elder financial abuse? On the record?" Marion hesitated. "Yes," she smiled faintly. "Then make sure your recorder works." That night, as she folded laundry by the fire, another envelope arrived. Hand-delivered, court seal gleaming in the lamplight. Inside, notice of civil hearing, estate planning dispute, filed by Tessa G. Thomas. Grounds, undue influence, mental incapacity, fraudulent update of will. Marion stared at the page a moment. Then she reached for the folder marked Proof and slipped the fitness affidavit inside. "No one questions my mind twice," she whispered. Marion had never minded the cold, but the air inside courtroom 4C felt surgical, cut glass, sterile, sharp around the edges. She sat quietly in her pressed navy suit, hands folded around a leather portfolio that held no less than 6 weeks of evidence, her neuropsych affidavit and a lifetime of boundaries finally drawn in ink. Tessa sat 3 rows ahead, flanked by a man in a slate-gray suit who looked as though he practiced smirks in the mirror. He kept whispering in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was scanning the gallery, half filled with townspeople, local seniors, and curious strangers who'd heard rumors of the co-signer showdown. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise." Marion stood slowly, chin high. Judge Carolyn Heller entered, black robe flowing, eyes like a ledger, every glance balancing logic against manipulation. Tessa's attorney went first. Your Honor, this case isn't about greed. It's about concern, he began, voice smooth as silk over broken glass. My client, Miss Tessa Thomas, acted in her mother's best interest. She feared her mother was being influenced or manipulated. The recent changes to the estate were drastic and sudden. He paused just long enough to signal false sincerity. Miss Thomas merely seeks transparency and, if I may say so respectfully, protection for her mother's assets. Marian didn't blink. When her turn came, Leah rose with the confidence of a woman holding a straight flush at a table full of bluffers. Your Honor, what my client seeks is not protection, but freedom from deceit, theft, and emotional manipulation. She turned, locking eyes with Tessa. We have documentation of forgery, unauthorized financial attempts, a voice recording obtained legally, and security footage of Miss Thomas illegally accessing private property. She opened the folder. Exhibit A, audio of Miss Thomas claiming the funds were as good as hers. Exhibit B, handwriting analysis indicating forgery. Exhibit C, notarized cognitive evaluation affirming full competency. Exhibit D, security footage dated 2 weeks prior. As each file was handed over, Tessa's posture shrank. Her lawyer's lips flattened into a white line. Judge Heller adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. You're telling me this adult daughter attempted to withdraw $40,000 without full authorization, submitted a forged consent form, and then accused her mother of lacking capacity when the plan failed? Leah nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned to Tessa's lawyer. Do you dispute the footage, the affidavit? He hesitated, then shook his head. We do not. Judge Heller's voice was cold steel. This is not elder care. This is exploitation dressed in familial concern. The room fell silent but for the click of the judge's pen tapping against her desk. I find no grounds to support the motion to contest the estate plan. Miss Marian Thomas acted with full legal and mental authority. Motion denied. A murmur spread through the gallery. Someone near the back whispered, finally. Outside the courtroom, Marian moved like a woman returning from war. Battle-worn, yes, but intact. She didn't look at Tessa as she passed, didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Tessa's attorney hurried to catch up to Leah in the corridor. Look, this has escalated quickly. Maybe we can mediate, quietly. Off record, no press. No settlement, Marian answered before Leah could. You don't want peace? I want accountability, Marian said. You don't get to rob someone and ask them to split the difference. The hallway was filled with whispers. A local reporter scribbled in a notebook. Marian's old bridge partner waved hesitantly from a bench. One of Lena's college friends stood in the corner, filming for a podcast on inheritance abuse. Marian walked through it all with the measured calm of someone who knew the temperature in the room didn't matter anymore, not when the heat was in her own hands. In the parking lot, as Leah packed up her briefcase, she turned and asked, So, you want to move forward with the asset recovery too? Marian didn't answer right away. She looked up at the sky, clear, wide, and finally hers again. Then she said softly but unmistakably, yes, every penny. The morning after the court ruling, Marian sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, a yellow legal pad, and a bank statement that stretched back 5 years. The sun poured in from the window above the sink, golden and sharp like truth. Lena leaned over the laptop, scrolling through PDF statements Marian had downloaded after gaining full access. We're not looking for chunks, Lena murmured. We're looking for drips. Marian nodded, eyes narrowing on a string of transactions. $48.22 Sephora, $319.77 boutique home decor, $5.99 mobile app, over and over. At first glance, they looked harmless. Until you noticed the dates, always the day after Marian's Social Security deposit, always under the joint account Tessa had insisted was just easier to manage. She bled it slowly, Marian muttered. Like a thief with a key instead of a crowbar. Lena clicked save and labeled the spreadsheet siphoning pattern 2019 to present. At Leah's office, Marian handed over the organized printouts. It wasn't just one fraud, she said. It was a habit, a lifestyle funded by my silence. Leah examined the files like an archaeologist studying a long-buried ruin. This, she said, is the kind of pattern that turns an accusation into a conviction. She tapped her pen against the affidavit Marian had sworn the day before. Time to file for financial exploitation and elder abuse under state statute. Will freeze anything that flowed through her hands tied to your assets. Marian gave a nod that wasn't small. It was final. The following week, Lena invited Marian to her Wednesday seniors tech group at the community center. They do more than email now, Lena teased, standing before a semicircle of folding chairs filled with cautious women in soft cardigans. Marian spoke, not formally, not dramatically, just plainly about co-signing, about slow betrayal, about the difference between helping and being harvested. When she finished, one woman with a silver braid whispered, "My son took out a credit card in my name." "I didn't even realize till they garnished my pension," another said. "They tell us we're paranoid, that we just forgot." Marian gave a quiet smile. "They don't want us confused. They want us quiet." Lena's eyes gleamed that night as they sat on the couch with tea. "You're not going to believe what I'm going to suggest," she said, pulling out her phone. Marian raised a brow. "God help me, we're filming a TikTok." Marian scoffed. "I don't even know what that is." "You're about to—" Lena angled the camera, started recording. "This is Marian. She's 72, legally competent, and just revoked access from a daughter who thought co-signing meant control." Marian smirked at the lens. "Here's how you stop financial gaslighting in 3 steps. Lena added captions, subtitles, a royalty-free beat. They uploaded it, let it go like a balloon. By the next morning, it had 58,000 views. The comments came like a flood. "My grandma's going through this. She's my hero. How do I do this for my mom? Please help protect Marian at all costs." The message was clear. Marian had started something bigger than herself. 3 days later, her landline rang just after 4 p.m. "Mrs. Thomas?" the voice said. "This is HR from Wellspring Solutions. Tessa Thomas is listed as one of our employees." Marian's breath stilled. The voice continued, clipped and cautious. "We've recently come across a few videos actually. There's concern. We'd like to verify some information regarding ongoing legal matters and potential elder abuse." Marian didn't flinch. "Everything you've seen is real. And there's more in writing." A long pause. "We'll need to speak with you again soon." She hung up and turned to Lena. "I think her house of cards just lost its foundation." It came 3 days after the HR call, an envelope from Wellspring Solutions marked confidential. Marian set it on the counter like it might still be warm. The return address had been printed by a machine, but the weight of what was inside felt distinctly human. Inside, a typed letter on letterhead and a brief statement in legal language that boiled down to this: Tessa's employment was now under formal review due to allegations of financial misconduct concerning a vulnerable adult, with further interviews pending. No apology, just protocol. Marian read it once, then again, then folded it neatly and slid it into her red folder marked Consequences. Later that week, a small envelope appeared in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just her name written in black ink that bled slightly at the edges. Inside was a single piece of stationery. At the top, a line: "I made mistakes. I never meant to hurt you." No signature, no apology, not really, just proximity to one. The note smelled faintly of Tessa's perfume, something citrusy and sharp. Marian stood by the trash bin for a long time, letter dangling in her fingers. Then she turned and walked it to her filing cabinet. She created a new folder, labeled it Regret Laundering, and slid the page inside without a word. 2 days later, Lena led Marian into the garden with a hand over her eyes. "No peeking yet. I swear, if there's a TikTok camera out here. Just wait." When Lena finally lifted her hand, Marian gasped, not in shock but in a kind of quiet reverence. Nestled beneath the flowering dogwood tree was a handcrafted bench, smooth cedar polished to a honeyed glow. Carved into the back slat in Lena's careful script, "Owned, never owed." Marian ran her fingers over the grain. "It's beautiful. It's yours," Lena said, "and so is everything else." Marian sat down slowly. The earth beneath her felt solid in a way it hadn't for months. That night, Marian opened a new document on her laptop. She stared at the blinking cursor, then typed a title: "The Co-Signer Myth, What They Don't Tell You About Family Finances and Control." She didn't write a preface, didn't start with a summary. She began with the moment in the bank, the moment her daughter said, "She's just the co-signer," loud enough for the marble floor to echo it back. From there, the pages poured out. Every check she'd signed without being asked, every drawer rifled through, every doubt stitched into her chest by someone who used to hold her hand crossing the street. As word of her case traveled, her phone began ringing more often. Women from church, from the community center, even from out of state. Some whispered, some cried, some asked for copies of her trust. Marian answered each call with a steady voice and careful steps. One woman sent a gift card with a note. "You reminded me I'm not crazy, just careful." Another showed up at her door with lemon muffins and a story about a son who opened a second mortgage behind her back. Marian welcomed them in. Then one morning a new kind of envelope arrived. Pink, heavy cardstock, floral seal. Marian sliced it open with the same butter knife she now used for nearly all incoming mail. The invitation inside shimmered with embossed gold lettering. "You're invited to celebrate the engagement of Tessa Grace Thomas and Matthew Charles Ellis, an evening of joy, new beginnings, and family reunions. Kindly RSVP by the 15th. Marian set the card down. Outside, the wind moved through her garden like breath through lungs. She didn't smile. She didn't tear it in half. She just whispered, "New beginnings come in all kinds of packaging." The pink invitation sat untouched on the counter for 3 days. Marian didn't RSVP. She didn't throw it away either. She simply watched it, like one might watch a snake slither across a garden path. Beautiful, dangerous, familiar. It wasn't until Lena forwarded her a screenshot that Marian understood the full game. "Found this on their wedding website," Lena said, dropping her phone on the table between them. "Private registry. You have to dig a bit, but look. Bottom of the About Us page." Marian scrolled, each flick of her finger scraping something raw. "We are blessed to begin this next chapter together. With no surviving parents on Matt's side and Tessa as the sole heir of her family estate, we are proud to carry forward the Thomas legacy." Sole heir. The words blinked in front of Marian like a second forgery, one typed in glittery font. "She's not just rewriting the past," Marian said quietly. "She's drafting my obituary while I'm still breathing." The night of the party came with a sky like smoke, gray, moody, hung with thick clouds that promised rain but only threatened. Marian arrived exactly on time, not early, not fashionably late. She wore a tailored charcoal dress with a brooch that had belonged to her mother, subtle but commanding. The venue was one of those renovated barns dressed up in fairy lights and Pinterest promises. Inside, everything smelled of eucalyptus candles, chilled rose, and performance laughter. Laughter swelled near the charcuterie table. A photographer adjusted his lens, and Tessa, dressed in champagne silk, moved through the crowd with curated grace. Her smile pasted on like a magazine spread. When she saw Marian, her expression cracked, not completely, just enough to reveal the scaffolding underneath. "Mom," she said through gritted teeth, sweeping toward her, "I didn't think you invited me." "I came." Tessa's fiancé, Matthew, appeared beside her. "We're so glad you could make it, Mrs. Thomas," he said, offering a handshake. Marian accepted it, firm, unapologetic. "Actually, it's just Miss... now." She didn't bring a gift bag, didn't browse the registry, or hug strangers pretending to be family. She waited until the toast began, just enough eyes on them, just enough silence to punctuate what followed. When the crowd quieted and the champagne flutes were lifted, Marian stepped forward. "I'd like to offer a blessing," she said, her voice calm, carrying, "for honesty, transparency, and clean beginnings." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a single cream envelope, sealed, embossed with her attorney's insignia. Tessa's face drained. "This," Marian continued, handing it to her daughter in front of the crowd, "is the legal update, retroactive, effective immediately. You are no longer listed on any of my documents. No property, no accounts, no inheritance." Gasps cut through the silence like breaking china. Matthew blinked. "What?" Marian looked at him almost kindly. "You may want to adjust the website." Tessa's hand shook as she held the envelope. "You can't do this here." "I just did." And with that, Marian turned. She walked out into the night without a glance back. The wind had picked up, cool, clean, scented faintly with lilacs from a garden someone else would never inherit. Behind her, Tessa's voice cracked like glass. "You'll regret this." Marian paused at the car door, placed a hand on the roof for balance, and murmured, "I already did, but only once." The next morning, Marian sat in her garden with a cup of chamomile, watching a squirrel dart along the fence. The pink envelope still lay open on the windowsill, mocking its own optimism. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Sender Cohen and Gold LLP. Subject: Request for mediation, estate disputes, and family division. Marian read it once, then again. Below the message, Lena's text arrived like clockwork. Want me to reply with a meme or a legal citation? Marian smiled faintly. Neither. Let's make it formal. The conference room smelled like fresh ink and nervous paper. Marian sat at the long table across from Leah, sipping water while a mediator's chair sat conspicuously empty. I read the brief, Leah said. They're asking for shared arbitration on misunderstood terms of inheritance. Not fraud, not forgery, just confusion. Marian didn't look up from the manila folder in her lap. Thieves don't get peace talks. They get audits. Leah slid a pen across the table. I can file the asset separation paperwork today. It's more than civil. Once the audit proves consistent siphoning, we're pushing into criminal. Marian signed without blinking. Then let's stop playing polite. Lena didn't just support the move, she amplified it. People don't get it until it's in their ears, she said, perched cross-legged on the living room floor with her laptop open and a tiny mic clipped to her sweatshirt. We turn this into a series, episodes, guests, stories. Marian arched a brow. You want me to air our family's dirty laundry online? Lena grinned. I want to show people how to wash theirs before mold sets in. They called it co-signed, not controlled. The pilot episode opened with Marian's voice, measured, calm, and sharp as ever. When someone tells you co-ownership is love, ask who holds the keys. Within a week, the podcast had 8,000 listens. By the third episode, survivors were emailing in, sharing their stories of checks cashed without consent, houses sold from under them, and wills rewritten in invisible ink. Marian didn't need to shout. She just needed a microphone. Meanwhile, the ripples reached further than expected. Tessa's name vanished from the board of a women's nonprofit she'd helped fund, quietly, no fanfare. A grant application was paused for review. Her fiancé's company retracted a PR feature before it ever posted. She made her bed in high heels, Marian murmured, but it's still just a bed of lies. The Midtown Beacon ran a profile under the headline, Power, Paperwork, and the Price of Permission. The article didn't sensationalize. It didn't need to. It opened with, At 72, Marian Thomas knew the cost of silence, so she wrote back with documents instead of doubt. There was a photo, Marian seated on the cedar bench beneath her dogwood tree, holding a copy of her podcast notes, the engraved words, visible behind her shoulder, owned, never owed. Old friends began writing, some called. A few showed up with casseroles and stories. You reminded me, one said tearfully, that we're not burdens. We're foundations. Marian never asked for attention, but she accepted every moment of it like she accepted sunlight after a storm. Earned, not gifted. Then one evening, Leah called. The sun was dipping low, casting a bronze light across Marian's freshly watered roses. Her phone buzzed once, twice. She answered. They're ready, Leah said. The bank, the investigation, everything. Marian didn't speak at first, just let the weight of it hang between them like an unopened envelope. It's been months, she finally said. Months of recording, filing, remembering every inch of what was stolen. I know. Marian glanced toward the file cabinet where the red folder labeled proof sat like a sealed verdict. Leah's voice softened. Do you want to come into the office, or should I read it to you over the phone? Marian's lips curved only slightly, not joy, not victory, just resolve. Read it, she said, out loud. The next day the envelope came by certified mail. Hand-delivered, signature required. Marian opened the door just as the delivery driver lifted his hand to knock. He handed it over without a word, but the look in his eyes lingered, a silent recognition. Maybe he'd seen her name in the paper. Maybe he just knew what victory looked like wrapped in legal parchment. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she made tea. She waited until the steam curled like breath over the rim of her cup, until her fingers were steady against the weight of justice folded inside. Then, at her kitchen table, Marian slit the envelope open with the letter opener Harold once used to file tax returns. At the top, First River Community Bank. Below, official determination regarding account ownership and legal standing. Following a full review of evidence, including security footage, voice recordings, notarized documentation, and third-party handwriting analysis, we hereby recognize Marion Thomas as the sole and primary legal owner of all relevant accounts and assets in question, effective immediately. Co-signer status of Tessa Grace Thomas is permanently revoked. There was more legalese attachments, a footnote that confirmed Tessa was now flagged in the institution's internal risk system, barred from co-signing or accessing any financial accounts at any First River branch for the foreseeable future. Marion smiled, but not wide. It was the kind of smile made in the aftermath of grief, not joy, but reclamation. She left the envelope open on the kitchen counter and walked slowly to the living room, where the fireplace mantel had long sat bare but for a photo of her wedding day and a candle she never lit. From a drawer beneath the bookcase, she pulled out the house deed, now legally fully hers again, and slipped it into the fireproof frame she had purchased weeks ago. She hung it above the mantel with Lena's help, one nail, one purpose. When it was level, she stepped back, brushing dust from her fingers like closing a chapter. "You good with that spot?" Lena asked. Marion nodded. "It took a storm to rebuild this house. Might as well see the foundation." That night she cooked. Not frozen meals or quick reheats. Real food, roast chicken, rosemary carrots, fresh bread that warmed the kitchen with the scent of home and finality. Lena arrived with a bottle of red and 2 friends from the podcast listener group, survivors both of them, who now spoke with the same clarity Marion had once believed she'd lost. They didn't talk about Tessa. They talked about wills, trusts, and love that wasn't tied to conditions or access codes. Over dessert, Marion raised her glass. "To women who don't just survive," she said, voice clear, "but audit the aftermath." The next morning, she sat by the dogwood tree bench, her journal in hand. She'd updated her estate plan the night before, quietly, thoroughly. Her house would stay in the family, but the other half, liquid funds, savings, stocks, was now earmarked for the Women's Financial Resilience Foundation, an organization she and Lena had quietly started filing paperwork to launch. It was time to turn damage into defense. Just after noon, her phone buzzed. Leah's name lit up. "Ready for another update?" her attorney asked, no preamble. "Always," Marion replied, adjusting her sunglasses. "Tessa's lawyer has officially withdrawn from the case. No mediation, no appeal, no further contact." Marion exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding the breath since spring. "And Tessa?" There was a pause. "She's on her own." Marion looked up at her framed deed through the living room window. The glass gleamed like resolve. "Exactly where she put me," Marion said. The whispers came first, soft, curious things that drifted through community inboxes, school board meetings, yoga studios. They weren't shouted, not yet, but they carried more weight than headlines. "She's not on the nonprofit board anymore." I heard her fiancé pause the wedding. Something about a lawsuit, her mom. Tessa's public life, curated like a gallery wall, had begun to tilt. One sponsorship withdrew quietly. A conference panel she'd been scheduled to moderate replaced her with someone younger and blameless. And finally, word broke that her employer had amicably parted ways with her, HR language for the kind of dismissal you don't put on LinkedIn. Marion read the news in a grocery aisle, flipping through the community paper, no photos, no explanation, just a 2-line announcement next to an ad for discounted potting soil. She didn't smile. She simply folded the paper and placed it in her cart beneath the bananas, out of sight. That evening, Marion sat at her desk with a fountain pen, one she hadn't used since Harold's passing. She pulled a single page of thick ivory stationery from the drawer and began to write. "Tessa, I won't waste this letter on blame. We've both carried too much of it already, though not equally. I'm writing this because silence gave you room to rewrite the story. This time, I will write it back. I was never just a cosigner. I was never your backup. You tried to cash me out of my own life, and when I finally spoke up, you called it cruelty. You didn't steal my money, you tried to steal my clarity. That was your mistake. This will be my last correspondence, not because I hate you, but because I love myself enough to stop letting you hold the pen. Not your cosigner, not your cover. Marion." She sealed the letter in a white envelope, no return address, no forwarding request. Then she walked to the fire pit out back, lit a single match, and watched it burn, corner to corner. Not in rage, in release. The next morning, the soil was still damp from last night's rain. Lena brought over the magnolia tree, Marian's favorite, cream-blossomed and stubborn. Picked it up from the nursery in town, Lena said, wiping her hands on her jeans. Thought maybe new roots. Together they planted it near the garden bench, the one Lena had gifted months before. Marian packed the earth with her bare hands, pressing firm and steady until the tree stood straight. Then Lena reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small plaque, bronze, subtle. Fully owned, fully alive. Marian didn't say anything. Her throat closed up before gratitude could form. But when Lena stepped forward and hugged her, the tears came anyway, silent, sudden. I just wanted you to be seen, Lena whispered. You made me visible, Marian murmured, even to myself. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Marian opened it to find her neighbor Elise standing on the porch with a clipboard and nervous energy. Hi, sorry, I know this is out of the blue, but... Elise laughed, then hesitated. We're hosting the town event this year. You know, the Women's Week Civic Forum, and, well, your name's come up a lot. Marian raised an eyebrow. I'm not much of a microphone person. I know, Elise said, but the thing is, you already spoke. With actions, with boundaries. You didn't just protect yourself, you taught all of us how... She held out the clipboard. We'd love for you to speak. 15 minutes. Tell your story, or don't. Just be there. Marian looked past her to the magnolia tree, where the wind was rustling through the new leaves. She didn't say yes, not yet. She simply took the clipboard. The folding chairs faced east, toward the sun coming up over the town hall steps. A breeze carried the scent of brewed coffee and crepe myrtle blossoms. Women filtered into the courtyard with walkers, canes, earbuds, and steel in their eyes. Some there to listen, some to be seen. Marian sat in the front row for the first few minutes, watching the empty microphone like it was daring her. Lena stood behind the soundboard at the edge of the stage, giving a tiny thumbs up. You still have time to change your mind, Lena whispered. Marian didn't blink. I'm already standing. She stepped onto the stage in soft gray slacks, a linen blouse, and her late husband's watch around her wrist. Not for luck, but legacy. The microphone hissed once before settling. She didn't flinch. Good morning, Marian began, scanning the crowd. Dozens of faces stared back, some wide-eyed, some weathered, all waiting. My name is Marian Thomas. I'm 73. I co-owned a house, a bank account, and a mistake. Laughter, tight, knowing, rippled through the crowd. She continued, voice steady. My daughter told a teller I was just a cosigner. What she meant was I didn't matter anymore. What she didn't expect was that I still had the deed. Murmurs, nods, a few gasps. Marian told them pieces of the story, not every fight, not every form filed, but enough to draw the map, enough to show where silence used to live. I came here to say something simple, she said, her voice growing firmer. Ownership isn't just a document, it's a decision. It's the moment you stop letting guilt hold the pen. A pause, then, you're not just caretakers. You're still owners of your time, your choices, your name. The crowd rose in applause like a tide, slow and roaring. One woman dabbed her eyes with a crocheted handkerchief. Another held up a fist, whispered, It's about damn time. Afterward, Marian stood near the magnolia sapling she'd donated to the town garden. The plaque at its base now read, Planted by Marian Thomas in defense of dignity. Women lined up, not for autographs, but for answers. Can you recommend a lawyer? My son's been using my credit. How do I prove it? Do I need a trust even if I don't have much? Lena joined her, clipboard in hand. We're going to need a second table next time. I'm not starting a business, Marian warned. No, Lena said. You started a movement. They stayed until the sky turned sherbet pink. Lena snapped photos of the magnolia in golden hour light. Marian sat on the bench nearby, answering emails from listeners, reading notes from women across the country who had heard her voice in podcasts and now saw themselves in it. No one mentioned Tessa. No one had to. That night, Marian returned home to her quiet living room, shoes off, tea warming between her palms. She opened her drawer and pulled out one final envelope, thicker than the rest, sealed in blue wax, embossed with her initials. Inside, her revised estate plan. She traced her fingers over the language, clean, unambiguous. It left the house to Lena, the funds to a women's financial resilience trust, and not a penny to the person who once called her just anything. Marian exhaled. She slipped the envelope back into the fireproof safe, clicked it shut, and whispered to the empty room. Final draft. Marian sat at the attorney's office desk, the weight of the pen heavy, but welcome in her hand. The ink glided slowly, cleanly across the parchment of her final estate document. No hesitations, no shaky lines, no room for misinterpretation. Across from her, Lena watched with her chin propped in her palm. Her eyes were glassy, but proud. "There," Marian said, placing the pen down gently. "Executive Lena Mae Thomas. Beneficiary, not entitlement, but intention." The attorney nodded, sliding the folder closed with a reverence usually reserved for sacred texts. "Everything's in place," she said. "It's done." "No," Marian replied with a small smile. "It's just beginning." 2 days later, she walked through her garden barefoot, morning dew clinging to her soles. The air carried the faint scent of lemon balm and damp soil. Spring had come early that year, as if the world had finally caught up to the pace Marian had set for herself. She paused beside the magnolia tree, now budding with creamy blossoms. At its base, another plaque had been added, not visible unless you bent low enough to read it. "Legacy isn't inherited, it's chosen." Endowed by Marian Thomas, Women's Financial Resilience Fund. The house, her house, would eventually become part of a sanctuary for women rebuilding from the financial abuse no one talked about until it was too late. A center for advocacy, workshops, and maybe even safe transitional housing, not a tombstone, a launch pad. Lena joined her on the back porch later that afternoon, a lemonade in one hand and a newspaper in the other. "You made page 2 again," she said, tossing the Midtown Beacon on the table. Marian barely glanced at it. "I'm starting to miss my anonymity." Lena chuckled. "You traded it for influence, wise move." They clinked glasses. The sun dipped low. The garden swelled with the hum of bees and the occasional creak of the wind chime Marian had installed near the dogwood. Inside, Marian pulled out her worn leather journal, its spine cracked, pages fluttering like old curtains in a breeze. She sat by the fireplace beneath the framed deed that now glowed amber in the waning light and began writing one final entry. No rewrites, no edits, just clarity. They say blood is thicker than water, but paper, the right kind, outlasts both. Tessa tried to reduce me to a footnote, a placeholder, a backup plan waiting to be overwritten, but I was never secondary, not in my own story. She called me just a co-signer. What she meant was I was no longer human, only a function, an access point. But I was the name on the deed, the heart of the house, the spine of our history. So I rewrote the ending. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. I chose Lena because she sees people, not opportunity, because she knows love isn't leverage. I gave the house to women like me, women with papers in their hands and battles in their silence. And I gave myself the pen finally. Co-signer? I signed my name in full. She closed the journal softly, pressing her palm to the cover like sealing a truth into the earth. That night, as the moonlight laced the garden in silver and the wind slipped through the open window, Marian stood once more in front of the fireproof safe. She opened it, slid the new estate plan inside, closed the latch. No hesitation, no regret. She whispered to the dark, not bitter, just finished. She tried to treat me like a backup. I signed her out completely.